All right, so I just wanted to make a quick video, kind of explaining kind of what I was getting caught up on at the beginning of creating code, what I was kind of confused about. So I just wanted to make a quick video. I kind of ran through kind of like Claude to kind of walk me through it. So I wanted to also do the same and see if I could help you guys understand it because now I have a better understanding of it, which in return should help me move on and not be so worried about what's going on in the previous code when I have it helping me with things like that. So to get started here, what we're doing is creating a GUI in Python, and what we're doing here is setting a class for it. So the class, and we can name the class whatever we want. So we've named it here firewall monitor. So this isn't something that's already inside of Python. I know sometimes with the parentheses I get hung up with it. Like, is it something that's already a part of Python or what? But no. So what we're doing here, we're creating the class and we're creating the name of it with these, and then we're putting the parameters right here or the parentheses, and then defining the parameters beneath it. So what we're doing here, everyone should know what defining is. So you're defining, and what this init does. I was really confused about this before, but what it's doing is creating the instance, creating the window inside of the GUI, inside of the firewall monitor. So that's what we're calling it. So when you call on the class firewall monitor, it's gonna bring up the window within it, and then we're setting the parameters for the inside of it. So self is setting the parameter for the name, and then root is going to be what you're changing the parameters to. It's going to be the window. So self is the firewall monitor. That's the name. So the self is the name. Root is going to be the window. Root's going to be like what we're setting here. So our title, we have our geometry, so our height and width and height. And then we configure the background with root. And then the reason why I have title here is so we can pass an argument to change title, change it later. So it's not hard coded in there. As you can see down here, that's where I'm changing the title name. So I set the variable monitor for self. You got to think about that. So self right there. And then inside of it is the root. And then the title, that's where I'm changing it. So looking at this, let's go up here and see how Claude helped me with it. So pretty much what it's saying, this is a constructor method class. The init method is a special Python method that runs automatically whenever you create a new instance, which is an object of a class. It's where you set up the initial state of your object. Line by line, define it, init, self, root. So it's giving it the parameters for the window, the name, and the window. So you're creating the window, boom, everything's right there. This defines the constructor, and it takes two parameters. Self, a reference to the instance being created. Think of this as the object I'm building right now. Every method in a class needs self as its first parameter so it can access and modify the object's own data. Root, this is being passed from the outside and based on context, it's a tkinter window object. Like I was saying, this is the title, and then this root is the window. Cool. So what we're doing here is setting the name of the window to root. We're doing everything there. So this stores root as the window instance variable, being able to change things. So kind of just like that, what we're doing here with the title. So this stores root window and the instance variable by attaching it to self. You're saying this object owns a reference to the window and I can access it later from methods in the class using self root. Root title, you're making the Pi-hole name. So if you were doing that, you would do it right there, root title, and then you would hard code it in right here, is what that's saying. Let's see. So as I was doing this, the init part kind of got me hung up. So in case anyone is still messed up on that, so what it is, it's a class, essentially the blueprint for creating the object. It's like a template. It defines what attributes, data, and methods, the functions, an object will have, but it's not an actual object itself. For example, you might have a class called router. This class defines that the routers have an IP, address, a host name, can perform actions like forwarding packets, but the class itself isn't a specific router, it's just a blueprint. So that's why you have my router equals router. So you would pretty much, in this example, this would be, let's get that out of here, router, and then you would set the parameters inside for what you wanted it to be. So first you'd have to do root, self. Self is always the first parameter, and then root, and then you can change it. You could do, yeah, I think that's right. Now I'm messing myself up. So these would be the parameters if you were to, let's just slow down. I'm getting ahead of myself. So that's what that would look like right here if you were calling on to the class. So let me get rid of this. Cool. Sorry if that was a little confusing right there. I'll just get back to this. So you're saying use the router blueprint to build me an actual router object. That object stored in my router is the instance. You could create dozens of instances from the same class, and each one would be on its own an independent object with its own data. Where init comes in, here's the key question. When you create a new instance, how does Python know how to set it up? What value should it start with? What's the initial configuration? That's exactly what init does. It handles the moment you call router or Pi-hole dashboard root. Python automatically runs the init method for that class. You never call it directly. Python calls it for you behind the scenes. So looking at this example, class, network device, define, init, self. So this is what I was doing kind of earlier. So I should have done it lower. So self, IP addresses, IP address, host name, and then self, remember, is calling onto the name. It's not the window. So the name, and you want its IP address, and you set it here. So you're not going to set the Windows IP address to that. You're going to set the self host name. So your network device host name is going to be whatever you make the host name. And then self is online equals false, saying that it is offline. So an example of that, when you write firewall, setting the variable, calling onto your class, you call self right here. That's what you're doing there. And then IP address right there. So you're setting the IP address for it. And then host name, main firewall. And then it's going to be set to off automatically. So what's happening? Python sees you're creating a network device instance. Python automatically calls init, passing the new empty object to self plus your arguments right there. So that is where you're setting the variables in the code. Inside init, those values get attached to self. So now this is specific so now this specific object has its own IP address, host name, and is online attributes. So it's not online. Remember that. It's false. So why self matters? Every instance is independent if you create two devices. So let's say you want to name a firewall and you set it with the network device and you put it with these parameters. You can call upon firewall and get these results. If you have your switch and you want to use it as a network device, you can set a new IP address, which is different from this one, and a different host name. You can still change these variables. You can make as many variables as you want calling upon the network device as long as these are different. The parameters. So each one has its own self. When init runs for the firewall, self refers to the firewall object. When it runs for the switch, self refers for the object. The self.ip address equals IP address line attaches that data to whichever specific object being built at that moment. So with that being said, so it attaches it, you're building the firewall variable and you're attaching this IP address to it and this host name. Cool. So here I was getting confused on the firewall part because I was not paying attention to the variable. I'm like, where the heck are you getting the variable? So I'm going to move past that part. All right. Let's see where I was getting hung up at over here. Oh, another thing I was getting hung up on these. So you shouldn't have a self.root something. That just, you should be either telling the name to set something as a variable. And if you're not telling the name to set something as a variable, you're telling the window to set something as a parameter. So pretty much that is most of what I have to go over for just starting the init function and then what this information kind of calls onto. So once again, I'll just quickly summarize kind of what we went through. So what we did was we created a class called firewall monitor. And then inside it, we defined an instance with the parameters self, giving it a name, root, giving it a window, and title, giving it a variable, giving it a name that we can pass and change. If you go down to self.root equals root, here, it tells me a better way to say that. So it's storing the root window as an instance variable, so other methods in the class can access it later. And then what we're doing here, we're setting the window geometry to this shape. We're setting the window background color to this. And then we're setting a variable for the name, the alert count. So when they come in, that number should display there or wherever you display it. And then self.title equals title allows you to change your title. So I just wanted to quickly go over that. And if anyone was having issues like me, hopefully this video helps explain that a little further. If not, use Claude like I did. Claude's great, and it should walk you through any issues that you have past this. All right. Well, I appreciate you guys. Thank you.